Our next our next speaker here is very inspiration, Dr. Manisha Gupta. She is a research scientist at Google, where she leads AI research in natural language processing and recommender ecosystem. She got her PhD in applied mathematics from Harvard University with a focus on biomedical and signal processing, and she also worked in the past with Amazon, Alexa. Her keynote is about is AI for all gender? How AI can make a difference for gender diverse population. Dr. Gupta, the stage is yours. 12 minutes.
Hi, Manisha. I know a lot of you here. And this is a very different talk for me. I think for the most important thing, this is like a combination of spirituality and, both scientific and spirituality come together. And I've never been given at a conference where I've given such a talk, so it's such a good opportunity. And secondly, none of this is actually the research I'm doing currently at my work, but I'm very interested in this topic. And it's more about ideas, exploration, because I want to just raise questions more, because there's very little research being done in this area. So next slide, please. Oh, can you skip this, actually? Sorry, this was my opening slide. I'm sorry, the previous one was not the one. Can you go to the next one, please? Okay. I just want to talk about, I've been a AI research scientist for close to a decade, and and for the past 6 years or so, I've been focused a lot on natural language processing, and this is way before AI became like a household and buzzword. But now the reason why, sorry, I think this is this is right. Oh, I can see it here. So now, the reason for this is because natural language is not really, AI is not really about language anymore. Language just becomes a medium, and that's why you have so much versatility in the application space. It's so powerful because you can use language as a medium to do anything. It's more like Play-Doh to make many applications. But however, whatever it learns from what it observes, right? It's observed data. And observed data is incomplete. And of course, it reflects our societal biases. So as a result, we have an ethical imperative is that the lack of representation, what is not observed, can cause harm. And that whole idea of fairness and bias in AI is like you've heard it many, many times throughout this conference. However, I want to take this is where I'm going to focus today is a little bit different. There's also a ethical dilemma. There has been a lot of focus on the best practices to mitigate bias, right? And I'm going to use the example of this particular community to show that perhaps the best practices, we have to be very careful when we apply these best practices, because can they actually cause more harm? Can they cause further marginalization? And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Next slide, please. What I'm going to talk about is basically, can AI be harnessed to support gender diverse communities? And what are gender diverse communities? Includes transgender, non-binary, and other forms of gender expression beyond the binary. As I said in this talk, I'm going to focus on questions, research ideas. I'm going to talk about a few applications of AI if we have time. So let's see. Next slide, please. I can skip the next one. This is good. Yeah. So what is gender diversity? Now, the diagram on the right, you can't read it, probably because it's too complicated and it's in small font. But it shows you it's a very complex. It's a really complex phenomenon. It's a very complex topic. You can go to a whole conference on it. I don't think that it exists, but there's a lot of literature, at least in the social sciences, on what gender is. But I'm just going to just for the sake of this talk, I'm just going to quickly go through. Gender diversity is an umbrella term which comprises of some overlapping categories. The first one is basically transgender, non-binary, and cisgender and intersex. So what is transgender? Transgender is basically somebody whose gender identity does not match the biological sex they were born with. Non-binary is somebody who does not identify with any particular binary gender. Cisgender is somebody who matches, and intersex is where I think I don't have to define that anyway. So the important thing to remember is that gender is not biological sex, and by that I mean also current as well as assigned at birth, which basically means that somebody could be biologically considered male, but they actually identify as a woman. And gender identity is also not the same as gender expression. Like you could express yourself in a feminine way, but you may not identify as a woman. So these are sort of, it's a very complex, fluid concept, and we have to be many ways to express gender. Next slide, please. You can skip the next one, please. Go to the next one, please. Yes. So there are many challenges that are faced, and I think for the sake of time, I'm just going to quickly go through that. We've been talking about gender bias for women. For the transgender and non-binary community, it's a lot more. It's like it's orders of magnitude, actually quite a bit larger than other biases, other communities. In mental health itself, there's 3 times higher rates of depression and anxiety, and therefore the lifetime suicide rate is about 41%, whereas in the general population it's less than 9%. So as a result, what happens is this results in underrepresentation of these communities in data, research, and media, and that invisibility further results in marginalization and further bias in AI-based applications, because that's where you observe the data, and if it's not there, you're going to cause further harm. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to just talk about, as I said, my focus is basically going to be like, I'm going to challenge this view of how can we, let me just use an example, okay? And this is going to be a little bit, I'm also going to share a little bit of my personal journey here, which is different from the talks I've done before. So can you, next slide, please? Yeah, so face recognition systems. Now, in 2018, there was this paper, there was this study which showed some commercial systems which were analyzed, and they showed that basically, using computer vision, when you try to recognize gender, dark-skinned females were the most misclassified group. And it was like close to 35% compared to less than 1% for light-skinned males. Now, since then, there have been a lot of data sets, et cetera, that have been developed to sort of challenge this and see if we have progressed. Next slide, please. Now, the result, but when this gets applied to the transgender community, the problem is actually a lot more severe. And there have been very few studies which have shown that automatic gender recognition systems can be really harmful to the transgender community, because the data is, they will be misgendered, right? Now, misgendering is like worse when it's done by AI versus humans, because with AI, you cannot tell it to change. Humans, you can correct them right away. And it can result in a lot of people basically staying away from AI-based systems, basically, because they don't if they can't trust it. And also it results in fear, like surveillance at airports. They're scared if systems are using it, and that really can also cause a lot of mental health, which already is an issue for this community. So there is a gender bias, but now we are going to talk about some research that has been done, which said how can you mitigate these biases, and I'm using this as an example, but this is true for most cases where you use best practices. So, for example, people say, why don't we use more nuanced labels? If you use labels for different gender types, or for the gender fluid, maybe we can classify the faces using this way. Maybe you can use more inclusive data sets. We can use self-identification of gender as labels. We can use more representation of engineers and annotators who are from the community itself. And we can also use perhaps like also, application developers can analyze the context in which the harms can be done, so it'd be more transparent. So, however, I want to challenge this basically by saying our best practices the best, always the best. And these are just, sorry, next slide, please, sorry. Next slide, sorry. I'm sorry, I missed that part too. Yeah, so, some of you might remember these apps called Face app, which has been banned, I think, in some countries. There's some other apps too, which basically can take a photo of you and change your gender. Now, you would say that's highly biased based on biased data, right? What the woman looks like, what a man looks like. It just uses all that very highly biased data. Next slide, please. So for example, this is just an AI-generated image. There is a image of a man, and you can actually use this software to transform into a woman, right? Now, this is what I want to just take a little pause here and share that, in my own journey of gender transition, actually I did this. And that was the first time I could see myself as a human being when I saw that image of mine. It was highly, of course, I'm not going to look like that, but when I saw that, I could see myself. And and in that journey, what I want to just also show, what I want to get to is like perhaps AI can help us with self-acceptance. And I say self-acceptance, and I also want to share the story about Amma because we're here. Is that I was very scared I was scared of judgment from people, and I went to Amma and I broke down and I said, Amma, I don't know what to do. I'm very scared. And Amma said, why have you been waiting for so long? You're my daughter. And when I heard that when I heard that she accepted that, I was able to self-accept, and everything changed around me. All my family, all the prejudices that I was afraid of just vanished. So I feel like if AI can help with that, why not, even if it's biased, right? Because those biases can perhaps lead you to some kind of acceptance of yourself. And we have to be careful. So for example, in a gender recognition software, suppose you use a label, somebody says, okay, well, this is a it takes a photo and you recognize this transgender woman. Now, you may not identify as a transgender woman. You may not want to tell anybody. You want to just say you completely think of yourself as a woman. So why would you want that? So labels are not really going to be helpful. Right? And this is what I want to challenge. Next slide, please. So basically, these are some things what people say for mitigating biases: data, labelers, and algorithms. We need to change all those. But is that enough? Can you next slide, please? And what I want to just sort of propose is labels are definitely not a binary. They are a spectrum, which I just mentioned as gender as an example. Next slide, please. Now, this is the thing which I want to challenge you again is labels are not fixed. Like ground truth is not fixed. For example, as I just said, somebody labels something as transgender woman. Well, that's not fixed. Somebody who's using that, the user of that, may not actually want that, right? So how can labels be, instead of a ground truth, can there be more subjective to the user who's going to use the application, right? Next slide, please. Also, the other thing is annotations we should allow for natural variances in annotations because humans are biased. So now, if I want to say use the software to see how female presenting I am, now I'm presenting female in front of people, so I need to look at what people's different biases, how they are, and I can sort of ask okay, well, if I'm going to an Indian sort of major Indian populations, can I sort of look feminine there, right, as opposed to somewhere else, right? So those kind of things, how things are annotated, are going to be different by different communities, different biases. But I may want to know that. So the next slide, please. So this variance in annotation should also be transparent to the user. Okay, so I may want to say, well, I really want this particular user. Okay, I'm gonna. Can I have one more minute? Okay, next slide. Okay, okay, next slide, please. Yeah. So I just want to say that, okay, these are some active areas of research that have been happening just in the past couple of years. This annotator diversity I was talking about. Actually, the annotator diversity can actually help us develop better applications. And this is a lot of active research at Google. We have a responsible AI team, which does a lot of work in this area. And just recently, there has been things I'm talking about labels. Next slide, please. There's another team also at Google who's working. This paper just came out. I think the first paper is talking about this. Can you, instead of ground truth labels, can you have perception aligned labels, right? And if people are interested in talking about this, please come chat with me. This is a very interesting idea. Next slide, please. And I just want to say, based on, this was an example, but there are a lot of applications beyond facial analysis which you can use for surgical outcomes. Like when I went to the Ames, they were using VR for your, for your cranium and for your skull. Perhaps you can use that for analyzing surgical outcomes. Next slide, please. Other applications, voice recognition. So for example, you could use that to, for example, if somebody's transitioning, you may want to assess how are you doing with your voice transition. And you don't have to pay doctors a lot of money because surgery can be very expensive. Perhaps you can use AI to train yourself. Next slide, please. And also natural language generation, there's a lot of applications. For example, non-binary translation. Now, in Hindi, I would say, I'm going to the store. If you say in Hindi, it's मैं जा रहा हूँ, मैं जा रही हूँ, can you translate it in a way that's gender neutral, like मुझे जाना है store, right? So maybe you can use that for people to learn how to express themselves. Next slide, please. Recommender systems, this is where I work. And actually what I work is in content gaps and recommender ecosystems. And perhaps there are content gaps, non-binary, clothing may not exist, right? It's a content gap. We don't have user data of consumption. But that sort of content gap can be perhaps used, AI can use to generate those content gaps. Next slide, please. Okay, and this is more applications we can talk about. Next, I'll skip through this. And I just want to go to the last slide. Next slide. The conclusion, right? So what I was trying to say is that biases in AI can potentially harm marginalized communities, but do we need to be careful? How do we mitigate these biases? And we want to think differently about labeling and ground truths. And can we use AI to actually empower these communities? And in fact, we have some transgender women at the I think exhibition who are actually the University Amma has actually helped them learn tailoring and fashion design, and perhaps AI can help you to do that, right? You don't have to go to school for you don't have to pay like thousands of dollars at FIT to learn fashion. Perhaps AI can teach you that. There's a lot of fashion AI is a huge area of research already, so things like that. Next slide, please. And this is just a very metaphysical question I want to just ask myself: will AI, when AI develops self-awareness, will it develop gender awareness? I don't know. You can answer that. So thank you so much. Yes.